Happy Taco Thursday. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy MB, and I got my guy Shane Carter in the building. How's it going, Shane?
Man, I feel like prime right now. You play my theme music like that.
Yeah, I might have to figure out if we have some theme music going on, so we'll have something going on for sure. But
I am a
before
little
we get
bummed
into,
out about. I am a little
yeah,
bummed out about today's news, though. So
yeah, we're definitely gonna get into. I like that shirt, by the way. But before we, yeah, I gotta show love to them '90s cartoons for sure. But before we get into it, we got to talk about our one of our sponsors, and that's What a Clean Solution. Need to get your carpets clean, couches, tile, and grout, moving in or moving out. Need to get that place looking brand new. Call What a Clean Solution, a family-owned mobile cleaning service that can clean anything from a small carpet to even making your car or truck look brand new. Give them a call at 210-790-1410 and use promo code TNT for 5% off your total cleaning. That's promo code TNT at 210-790-1410 for 5% off. So yeah, kind of speaking back into I don't know about you, but when somebody says I got some good news and bad news, I always want to kind of hear the bad news first and then end it off on good news. So I think we should get into what happened in practice today. I don't know if you want to break the news to anybody that hasn't found out yet.
yeah, two-time Pro Bowl and one-time All-Pro cornerback Trayvon Diggs, who just signed a 5-year, $98 million contract in the offseason, tore his ACL on a non-contact injury. It was just improperly planted, and he was able to get up on his own strength, but unfortunately, it was enough damage to the knee to where after he underwent the MRI, they determined it as a complete tear in the ACL, and so he's done for the year, which is like not the hugest blow to the defense, but still a huge blow nonetheless.
Yeah, it's not the news you want to hear on a Thursday or any type of day. Like it's week 3, and you're like, dang, because you're already like, man, you're already kind of getting it prepared to like, okay, you got Gilly, and then you got Trayvon on the other side. But the positive note is we do got depth compared to what we had last year when it
Yes,
comes
we
to our
do.
corners. That's the biggest plus. Like you got Deron Bland, you got Izzy who can play. Wanye played a little bit, and then you got I'm trying. There's a lot of guys that you can think of that
So the plan is right now is obviously Gilmore steps in as the number one corner. Deron Bland moves back outside, kind of like he did at the end of last season, and they do this with Jordan Lewis, and he's going to come back in and play full time nickel. Right now, the depth looks like Israel Mukwame would be the backup nickel. He played some there last year, and then the Noah Igbenogany, the trade the player that we got with Kevin Joseph, he would be the depth at the outside corner.
Yeah.
That's what it's looking like. We might potentially see some Eric Scott down the line.
Yeah.
We'll see. But for right now, the stars in the secondary are going to be Gilmore, Lewis, and Bland on the outside. So let's leave that there. We'll see how it goes, and we'll address it later if we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. But kind of speaking on the Cowboys defense, man, could you imagine that these last 2 games where we skunked the Giants and then the Jets we only let them have 10? They're just seeing what this Cowboys defense has done in these past 2 games. And I know you're definitely like into the stats because I am a little bit because you look at guys like when it comes to our defense, our edge rushers with Michael Parsons, DA, and also definitely stepped up as well as that another guy and D Law. Is there any other guy that really that has really surprised you in these past 2 games?
Well, besides Wanye, he made a couple nice plays in the opening night. But I mean, in terms of both game 1 and 2,
Yeah,
I've been overall really, really impressed. And a guy that surprised me, you said, right? A guy that's really
yeah,
surprised me Marquise Bell is one of the team's leading tacklers. He's done, I would say, a pretty good job
yeah,
of securing what would be that second interior linebacker spot whenever Leighton Banner is off the field. He plays sort of like in between a Will and Sam hybrid type outside linebacker. He plays more on the inside. He's had to get more snaps just because the injury to DeMar being overshown and the fact that the Cowboys only kept 4 pure linebackers, one of those being Micah Parsons, who's very much like a Roman chess piece. But he stepped in and they said, "Hey, we want you to play a little bit less safety this year. We're going to play a lot more inside." And just because he's so flexible in what he does, it was no issue for him. And he's I think leading the team in tackles right now, as a matter of fact. So he's actually been really impressive for me.
Yeah. Because if you look on it, that he's like one of the main on the top when it comes to tackling. Like you're a guy that was mainly a special teamer last year. He was mainly a safety, has converted to a linebacker. Has been doing a really good job. Because at first we thought that was going to be a Damone Clark. That was going to be that guy at that position. But you're seeing that Marquise Bell stepped up. Like he brought up Wanye is another guy that was on the practice squad majority of last year. But you're seeing a lot of young guys stepping up in this defense, and it's great that we have depth when it comes to defense. When then we get Donald back, so that's a big plus to the secondary.
Yeah, and I agree. I think depth is the name of the game. We knew the pass rush was going to be good. I think we underestimated how good and how deep the secondary really was, but I mean, it really is a blessing. It really is a blessing to see that kind of thing, especially when you see someone like DeMar being overshown, out for the year. Trayvon Diggs out for the year. Donovan Wilson hadn't played yet. He should be back. Yeah. It's just nice to see the depth really working its way in and the fruits of their labor, so to speak, showing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing I wanted to talk into is our red zone defense. Red zone offense. And last week we were 2 for 6 in the red zone, but when we played against the Giants, we were 3 and 4. Do you think it's one of those things that we should are we overthinking, or is it kind of something that we should take into consideration? Maybe needing improvement.
I mean, I would have liked some of the play calls to be better. I think really Mike McCarthy is very much of the mindset of like, okay, we had the lead, let's not do anything stupid. And when you're down in the red zone, the field shortens. So anytime you throw the ball, yes, it could very much be an either way kind of play because the field is so much smaller, less space to play with. I think overall the red zone calls have been fine. The execution's been a bit of an issue. We saw on that pull play with Peyton Hendershot when he ran the inside jet sweep. I think it was Hunter Lupke or someone on the edge. They missed the block, and that caused Peyton Hendershot instead of to go outside. Instead of to go inside where there was a hole, he kept going outside, and he was just swallowed up. That pass that went to Ferguson in the corner on third down when CeeDee Lamb was wide open on the opposite side of the field, that was just a bad call from Dak. That was on him. Yeah. But as far as the overall red zone offense itself, no, not really. Especially just because I think that the truth is that the Cowboys in the red zone were playing more just like, hey, let's run the ball, let's keep this clock moving, let's get out here with the win. Points or no points. If we get field goals, fine. If we get touchdowns, great. I think it was very much they got into the fourth quarter and they started to conserve more of their energy, more of the offensive play calls because Dak threw less than half his throws in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. I think he only threw 4 pass attempts in the fourth quarter. So they were very much like, okay, we have a double-digit lead. Let's secure it. Let's get out of here. They knew they had that game won. I would only worry about this more if when they get down the line, we play the harder opponents and it becomes a recurrent issue. Until then, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, they were just playing smart complementary football in the fourth quarter where you don't have to throw the football. You got this big lead. Just run the ball and rotate. I like how they were rotating the running backs in and everything. It's just all I want to see. I'm going back to my tweet in the game. Can we get a Hunter Lupke for just one touchdown?
I would have loved that. I would have loved that because we saw the screen. We saw the screen pass was Hunter Lupke and Jake Ferguson block on the outside to Rico Dowdle. That was very much a big, powerful screenplay because Dowdle was very much like what you would call their power back if we consider more of a fullback, and he's very much a hard nosed kind of runner. I thought that would have been a fun play to see Deuce or Tony Pollard in because Rico has some burst, but not really that downhill speed that the other guys have. But that was very much like a bruising type of screenplay.
Yeah, that'll just be fun to see. Hopefully, we get that this season. There's still plenty of football going on, but we got our guests coming up soon. But I wanted to give a show love to our second sponsor. That is SeatGeek. So SeatGeek's Life's event. We have tickets, concert, games, shows, and more. Use promo code all capital letters Tacos Touchdowns to get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek, a ticket for every fan. So what the show is mainly about is Cowboys versus Cardinals preview. But I'm gonna let my guy Shane introduce our guest coming up. We got him in the booth right now, so I'm gonna give the floor to you, Shane.
is one of the lead hosts for the PHNX network covering the Arizona Cardinals. A friend of mine who I networked back a couple years ago, seeing the amazing growth he's made with PHNX Sports. I want to bring on who I call Johnny V, Mr. Johnny Venerable. Johnny, how you doing?
Fellas, what's up? Thanks for having me on. Excited to chat with you.
And before we get started, Johnny, I just want to point out, like, I've been so proud and impressed with the growth you've made in the industry covering Arizona sports in general. I had you on a few years ago on my podcast, Dem Boys podcast back then, as it was known.
Sure.
And ever since then, just seeing the way you've grown in the industry has not only made me proud, but impressed all around. I'm happy to have you on again. I know I've been trying to get you on, and I'm just happy we could finally find a time and date to make it work.
Well, that's very nice of you, Shay. It's a pleasure. Us podcast hosts, you gotta stick together. I've been very fortunate, very blessed to be put in a position to cover the team and do a daily podcast through PHNX Sports with my guy Bo Brock covering this team. And we feel like we've got something pretty special going at PHNX Sports. And we would love a kick in our ratings this weekend with a win over the Dallas Cowboys, but that might be asking a little too much, so we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, so I don't have more professional background of having to do this outside the iHeart Studios because I have to produce the evening stuff tonight. But I told Aaron I'll make this happen any which way.
No worries, no, all good, man. I've been there.
I always do like introductory questions to our guests. So, when you became a Cardinal fan, what was that Arizona Cardinal player that you were like, okay, this is my team?
My father is and has been a Cardinal fan our entire life, my entire life, and so growing up in Central Illinois originally before I moved to Phoenix, St. Louis Cardinal football was what he keyed in on as a kid, and then they migrated out west. But for me, growing up, casual fan into a diehard fan of this team before covering them, professionally, probably some combination of a little bit of Aeneas Williams. Of course, I knew of Pat Tillman when I was younger, but I was born in '88. 10 years later, they're in the playoffs, but probably Anquan Bolden just before Larry Fitzgerald was the player that, I became most infatuated with. His rookie debut, first game against the Detroit Lions, putting up over 200 yards. But, it's cliche. But, of course, Larry Fitzgerald, Carlos Dansby, Darnell Dockett, as I got older, of course, Adrian Wilson. But Q was probably the first one where, I got really, really invested in the team.
Those are some great guys. Now, a lot of people don't even think about but they brought the heat when it comes to them playing. So
yeah, it's unfortunate that he left the team on the terms that he did. I hope that one day they can put him in the Ring of Honor because I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. But he had success with Baltimore, won a Super Bowl, and then of course went to San Francisco and made another Super Bowl. So just an all around great ambassador for football, and hopefully they can get him into the Ring of Honor at some point.
I definitely agree. So Shane, I don't know if you want to go with the question.
Oh yeah, so the main issue for me, and I've been telling Cowboy Nation this all week, that this Cardinals team is a trap game for a couple reasons. And I think right now we're riding the highs of back-to-back blowout wins against these Jersey teams. We're going up against a former rival with the Cardinals, and for some reason, and this happens every year, the Cowboys lose to a team they definitely shouldn't. It always is. And this is a trap game not only for that. We overlook y'all just because Kyler Murray ain't on the field. And we're about to play in 3 consecutive weeks the New England Patriots, the Chargers, and then the 49ers. And so people kind of consider the Cardinals, maybe considered I guess people think the worst team in the NFL. They've been competitive the first 2 weeks. Y'all had that game against the Giants. You almost closed out the game against the Commanders. Josh Dobbs is completing 69% of his passes, and he's also, I think, y'all's leading rusher at 7.5 yards per rush. And the Cowboys have allowed almost 5 yards per rush to opposing quarterbacks. And so am I wrong for overthinking this? You cover the team more in depth. Am I overthinking this game, or do you really see the Cowboys doing what they've been doing to your team as well?
It's a huge, robust spread for a reason. 12 and a half, 13, depending on where you gamble at. The Cardinals, I mean, I don't want to say they should be 2-0. At minimum, they should be 1-1. They controlled the Washington game through 3 quarters, led in the 4th quarter. They certainly controlled the first half of football against the Giants last week was the best half I've seen in a decade plus of any Cardinal team. And, you know, I think what it comes down to is they just don't have the talent to close games out. They don't have the horses, and their front seven in particular is really limited. And then you mentioned it, you know, no Kyler Murray now, no Budda Baker for the 2nd consecutive week. They're going to win games this year. They're going to win games probably that they're not supposed to or projected. I just don't know if that starts this week. It's a very tough spread of games now coming up, stretch of games for the Cardinals. They not only play the Cowboys, then they play San Francisco in Santa Clara. They play Cincinnati at home. And then it gets softer in their schedule, and that's kind of projected when K1 comes back. So I think most of us, I thought that they would split these first 2 games way back in the summer, in the spring. I said they'll steal one of these first 2 games, and they frankly should have. Jonathan Gannon has been impressive, but again, there's a reason why people assume that they're not going to win much of anything this year. I think it's like the opposite of what's happening in Chicago, right? With the dysfunction, coach that could be fired, a quarterback who could be ousted. Like the Cardinals have buy-in of this new regime, and I think they've handled this offseason almost flawless. But they've stripped it down to the studs. They traded away Isaiah Simmons for, you know, a bag of peanuts. They cut D-Hop for nothing. They're really going with young players, undrafted guys, and you can win games like that if your coaching is elite and you know, above water. But Dallas, to me, unfortunately, before this Trayvon Diggs injury, was the best team in the NFC. I still think they're going to host playoff games, but you know, kudos to Dallas. They've got a top roster in the NFL. And a team that I think has a huge margin for error, especially against the Cardinals. Like the Cardinals have a very small margin for error. They can't turn the ball over. They have to have consistent drives, you know, 7-8 plays, so they're not going 3 and out. Whereas Dallas, they have big play offense. They run the ball exceptionally well, and then I think it's the best defense in the NFL.
When it comes to yeah. So one of the things I noticed about on your offense, y'all have a veteran with Zach Ertz, but then last year y'all drafted a Trey McBride. Do you think he eventually is going to get more reps at the tight end position? You're going to see less reps with Zach Ertz, so they're eventually trying to develop him as that tight end one?
Yeah, I would like to think so. He is somebody that was robbed of opportunities last year, should have played more, and then they eventually featured him at the end of the year. And then this year, unfortunately, I was at training camp, and he went down and really kind of limped around for a couple weeks, and they held him out. And so he's playing his way back into shape. Ertz is coming off a torn ACL, and I like Zach Ertz. He should be in the Hall of Fame, but he's over 30 years old. I think he's probably in the last year with the Cardinals, even though his contract runs beyond this year, just the amount of money that is promised to him. But the Cardinals like 2 tight end sets. Offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. Ertz has seen the highest targets of anybody on the team, which, again, I think is a little overblown. It's a byproduct, too, of starting a quarterback that's been here for less than a month. So to answer your question in a well-rounded way, McBride, to me, has a ceiling of like 600, 700, 800 yards. I think he can be that type of player. He was the #1 college tight end drafted last year out of Colorado State with an emphasis on receiving. I mean, his senior year at Colorado State was elite from a receiving standpoint. I think he's picking up this offense slowly but surely. He's had 2 big plays each of the last 2 weeks wiped out by penalties through no fault of his own. But yeah, I would be shocked at the end of the year if he's not solidified as their tight end one. And it may be from a yardage standpoint, they're not going to pass for a lot of touchdowns while Kyler Murray's out. So you really got to watch the game with your eyes to see the kind of player McBride can be, especially from a run blocking standpoint. He's a much better, more physical run blocker than, you know, frankly, Ertz is. But I mean, how many more years is Zach Ertz going to play football? I don't know. So,
you know, on the subject of targets, right now, 2 guys occupy over 50% of y'all's targets. That's Zach Ertz and Marquise Brown, who is, y'all found unique ways to get him the ball. I've seen different highlights and different usage, especially from your account, that y'all have been using Marquise Brown not only as like just a deep threat, but y'all have given him plays in the running game. Y'all have had him play some crosses across the middle. What is it about Marquise Brown this year that he's being utilized in multiple roles, and we're finally kind of seeing a glimpse of that Oklahoma player we once saw, and why was that being held back for so long?
Well, it's interesting. they're in a weird spot with Hollywood Brown, and give Hollywood credit. He's been bought in. He was not traded for by this regime. He left Baltimore and was traded for by Steve Keim, who's not with the organization, thankfully, anymore. And he's been inserted into an offense, Shane, where they put a preference on bigger targets, bigger receivers. Drew Petzing in Cleveland's offense last year as their quarterback coach, now the OC for Arizona, he had no wide receiver or tight end under 6 foot. So he goes to Arizona and everybody's small, everybody's little, right? And so I think that in a perfect world, he would have Michael Wilson, maybe eventually like a Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside. But he's like, well, I have this supremely gifted receiver and we don't have Kyler Murray to take advantage of the deep ball. Like, how can I get him the ball in space? And so I give a lot of credit to Hollywood Brown. Again, he's been at every single, off-season workout. He had a really nice training camp. He's battling through an ankle injury right now. So he's in a contract year. And I don't know if he's a lock to be on this team next year. So he's doing his best to find his footing, maybe with his next team. And again, I could be proven wrong. He could have 1,400 yards this year and get a nice contract by the Cardinals. But I mean, their investment is in the rookie Michael Wilson. They took this guy at the end of the 3rd round. He led the team in receiving yards last week. Out of Stanford, physical player, dominated the Senior Bowl, just had some injuries at Stanford. And so now you think about what they're going to do, not only this year, but into the future. They want big guys. They want big targets. And unfortunately for Hollywood, I feel like he might just kind of be a transition player on this team.
You actually, I had that question down. I was going to ask you about Michael Wilson, so you beat me to it. But my next question is, like, you see it like when it comes to Will Hernandez and Paris Johnson, who show they're really good on the right side, but it's that left side. What do y'all think y'all need to do to protect that left side? Because I see where they're going to have a Micah Parsons probably trying to attack that side, and then a D-Law. What do you think they need to do when it comes to this Cowboys defensive line?
Hope and pray and get a 6th lineman in there. DJ Humphries has been a nice player with this team. Somebody else too. Like a lot of players this year for this Cardinal team are being good soldiers, right? They're going to fight the good fight in a transition rebuild year. Not going to be on the team next year. They moved all of DJ Humphries' guaranteed money to this year, so that likely they could move off of him. I don't know if you guys you're not in a position to scout the 2024 draft yet, and good for you guys, but it's an elite tackle class, Joe Alt and company. So and then Elijah Wilkinson at left guard has been a huge liability. They lost what equated to their 6th and 7th linemen in the preseason, 2 interior guys, John Gaines, a rookie out of UCLA, and then another journeyman, Dennis Daly, that they were going to play a little bit of left guard. So they're just, it is just kind of what it is at this point. Humphries to me is making a top 3 salary on the team. He just needs to stay healthy, and it's going to be difficult though. Paris Johnson Jr. is the best offensive lineman on this team, in my opinion. He's given up only 2 QB hurries all year, 0 pressure, 0 sacks. And then Will Hernandez has been a gem of a signing for Austin Ford, extended him from really the prior regime. He couldn't get through last year, wasn't healthy. They're more effective running the football on the right side, and then the pass protection is better. So a big week for DJ Humphries, because he's been a stalwart on this Cardinal team. He's a leader. He's a captain. He's a great human being. But, I mean, it's just time's, catching up with him. And Micah Parsons is, the best defensive player in the league right now. So I would imagine you'll probably see Kelvin Beachum, who's their swing tackle, act as a 6th offensive lineman. To your point, I think they're going to try to run the football as best they can. Where they got into trouble against Washington, and what led them to 2 turnovers in the 4th quarter, basically, was that Dobbs got put in positions where he had to have 5 to 7 step drops, and, Deron Payne and Montez Sweat made them pay. They're going to try everything they can to not let that happen this week.
Speaking of defensive lines, y'all actually have a pretty decent bevy of rotational pass rushers, led off by I'm trying to pronounce his last name as best I can, but I'm blanking on his name. Gardeck.
Dennis Gardeck.
Yes, thank you, Gardeck. He's actually one of the top pressure rate edge rushers in the league right now. He's been kind of like I guess you would call him an out of nowhere type of player. Is there any sort of player on this defensive line Gardeck included if you want, who the Cowboys offensive line should be concerned about?
Yeah, Gardeck's interesting because he was a tweener rotational player under Vance Joseph, was making like $5 million this year. They were cleaning the roster out in the spring. I'm like, well, certainly Gardeck won't be on the team. He had like 1 sack in 2 years or 2 sacks in 2 years, and they kept him around. He's a great guy, great in the locker room. But to your point, Shane, they have much more athletic players. B.J. Ojulari, 2nd-round pick, Zaven Collins, 1st-round pick, transitioning to pass rusher, Myjai Sanders, Cameron Thomas, 3rd-round edge rushers last year. I'm like, well, how are they going to utilize this guy? And he had 2 sacks in week 1. He had a sack last week. He's undersized, but again, like I've learned now to just not question personnel with Jonathan Gannon defensively. Like they're pushing all the right buttons with the players that they have. They're squeezing that orange to do everything they can. So Ojulari was hurt most of the offseason. He's playing himself back into shape. Had a nice pressure last week that led to a Jalen Thompson interception. Myjai Sanders isn't active because of a hand issue. He should be back soon. Cameron Thomas was quiet, but had a good week 1, scoop and score fumble for a touchdown. And Zaven Collins had a half a sack last week. So it's not a bad group. I don't know if it's going to prevent them from targeting an early edge rusher next year, but they can make it work. Where they're really struggling is their 3 and 5 technique defensive tackles. It was already a unit that I thought was bottom 3 in the NFL before the season. And now they've lost Kevin Strong, who you guys are familiar with. And then of course, LJ Collier, the ex-Seahawk 1st-round pick. So Lecky Fotu comes back, nose tackle, fine, rotational player, but they, for so long, they had Calais Campbell and Darnell Dockett and Steve Keim whiffed on Robert Kimdichie, picking him over Chris Jones, and they missed on, Darius Philon in free agency, and Jordan Phillips in free. I mean, outside of J.J. Watt and Zach Allen, who are not on the team anymore, it's been a rotation of just kind of misfits and guys that didn't pan out. So that's an area I'm sure the Cowboys are going to target up the middle defensively. Cardinals have done an okay job mitigating it, but at some point it's going to rear its ugly head. That's a position group that they're just trying to duct tape together until the offseason.
Speaking on Xavier Collins, do you think has like the highest ceiling when it comes to on this defense? Because I know the Cowboys are looking at him at one time, but we got Michael Parsons. But what do you think about Xavier Collins' potential on this defense in the future?
It's interesting. They really like his work ethic. They shipped Isaiah Simmons out of town for peanuts because they didn't like his work ethic and he wasn't a team guy. Whereas Zaven is very much gels with Jonathan Gannon, and I think they value rotation. So I would not be surprised. Hopefully he gets his 5th-year option picked up. He actually had an interception week 1 and a fumble recovery, but can he rush the passer? At the end of the day, he's got a half a sack in 2 games. If he can get to like 8 sacks this year, I think they would be happy with that. But I would probably say that the front 7 player with the most potential, even just 2 games in, is probably B.J. Ojulari at LSU. They took him top 40 or top 45, and it was a pick of this regime. And so I would not be surprised at the end of the year if he's playing meaningful snaps. But between those 2 guys, I think you're right. I think they'd like to build around them. Kaiser White's a nice player they picked up from Philadelphia on a 2-year deal. Obviously, the secondary, there's a cornerback by the name of Keitrell Clark. Probably won't shadow CeeDee Lamb. Will probably be Marco Wilson, but he'll be active in the secondary. 6th-rounder out of Louisville. Gannon is a defensive back savant. This kid's been starting for months now and had a really nice outing these first 2 weeks. So Keitrell Clark is a name to watch. I don't think he'll ever maybe be cornerback 1, but as a nice, second option CB2 in the secondary, they like what they see. So I think what's difficult, though, the offense has most of the talent, the young talent on this team. The defense, it's like a colander. You're just trying to see what sticks from the prior regime, right? Where the offense has got Paris Johnson Jr., starter as a rookie, immediate starter. Michael Wilson, starter as a rookie. Kyler Murray's coming back. I still have huge aspirations, Aaron, as you mentioned, with somebody like Trey McBride. Like if there's a unit that's going to probably be ahead of schedule this time next year, especially if they use a top pick on another offensive player in the draft, it's probably going to be the O. The defense, they're really going to rely on Gannon to have it overachieve, to continue to overachieve, frankly.
Johnny, I got one last question. Aaron can ask the rest if he wants to. My focus really on this is Buda Baker, right? He's on IR. He's out for this game. He has been a thorn in the Cowboys' side since he got drafted. He's been like, Aaron knows, he's been the one player most consistently when we play y'all that has been coming down defensively. He's an undersized, hard-hitting player who can be a ball hawk if you give him the opportunity to. He's not going to be there in this game. Who do you think in the secondary is going to be, I don't necessarily want to say the best player, but the X factor, the one that can either make or break how well the Cowboys passing attack does?
You know, Jalen Thompson is their, I guess, free safety, but plays a little bit in the slot. Was his supplemental draft pick in the 5th round. Was actually the last supplemental pick that's been in the NFL. Remember, they took the supplemental draft away. They brought it back this year. No selections. He was the last one out of Washington State. He's been an exceptional player. He got a nice extension last year. Interception in last week's game. He's their best defensive back right now. You can't replace Buda Baker, but I do think that when Buda got hurt last week was like 48 hours before the game. That hurt them. Had they been able to practice the entire week ahead of the Giants and elevated a guy from the practice squad, signed somebody and put a game plan together, they might beat the Giants. But that really threw a wrench into what they wanted to do defensively. Kayvon Wallace is another guy who was in Philadelphia with Jonathan Gannon, was a rotational player. Coincidentally, it's funny. Kayvon Wallace, a safety from Clemson, the year Isaiah Simmons goes top 10 out of Clemson to the Cardinals, Kayvon Wallace goes a true safety in the 4th round of the Philadelphia Eagles that year. And then the Cardinals cut Simmons, or they trade Simmons for like a 7th round pick, right? And then the Eagles cut Kayvon Wallace like a week later. The Cardinals claim him, and he's starting for them week 1. It's just funny how that worked out, and he's been a really nice player. We had him on our podcast last week. He had a really nice week 1. He's a great open field tackler. The secondary, to me, I think will be okay. Again, it's this front 7. That's what wore down against the Giants. I know they were giving up big plays to Daniel Jones left and right, but they couldn't get pressure on him. And that was out without Andrew Thomas, and they were missing a guard, and Saquon had a nice second half. But the secondary for me, you know, they'll probably shadow CeeDee Lamb with an extra defensive back. I would say, you know, Dallas's 2nd and 3rd wideouts will probably have a nice day along with their tight end. You know, Dak's known to turn the ball over. If Dak will play conservative football this game, I think that's what they'll preach. They'll win this game, I think, pretty handedly. But if Dak turns the ball over, then the Cardinals will hang around. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
So my last question is, what is like your keys to victory on offense? What does the offense need to do to stay in this game? Because you've seen where y'all were very close to our NFC East rivals, where it was like, oh my, they might beat the Giants. They may beat the Commanders. What do you think y'all need to do on offense to even have a chance?
Man, it's hard because last week, Aaron, they scored 28 points. They ran for over 150 yards. They didn't turn the ball over, and they still lost. I would say, to me, it's, you know, Dobbs playing clean football again. Over 50% on 3rd down would be helpful. Explosive gains downfield in the passing game. Minimize the penalties, but I would say the number one thing is keeping Josh Dobbs upright. If the Cardinals, like, this is not Kyler Murray's team, obviously, right now. If the Cardinals surrender an early down sack and it's 2nd and 17 or 3rd and 12, like, the drive's over. Whereas with Kyler or a franchise quarterback, Dak or somebody, like, you can manufacture yards and get a big play. Not right now with this Cardinals offense. They can't go backwards. So they need to be living in 3rd and 4, you know, 3rd and 5, 2nd and 6, positive yards going north and south. And they did that in the first half against the Giants last week. And then in the second half, the wheels kind of came off. So I would say manageable 3rd downs to get you over 50% on Sunday will probably be the best recipe to keep them in this game.
Johnny, thank you for being on. Do you want to go ahead and plug all your socials, where people can find you, find your work?
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm at Johnny Venerable on Twitter. I host with my good friend Bo Brock a daily Cards podcast, the PHNX Cardinals podcast. Follow us, PHNX_Cardinals. Get your podcasts wherever podcasts are found. Check us out at PHNX Sports on YouTube.
I appreciate you, Johnny, for being on the show, taking that time to be scheduled.
We appreciate you guys. Shane, Aaron, take care, guys. Good luck this weekend.
Johnny V.
Man, it's great. It's great to have another great guest on the show just to talk football and just getting that different perspective from the opposing team. And isn't the best thing is you can have this silver conversation just to talk about, even though you're playing against this team. Like, okay, these are some of the breakdowns and just getting to know what they're about and just about their team. That there's a lot of players I still didn't even know on the Cardinals, but I'm like, okay, I remember that guy when he played for the Eagles or so.
There's no one who covers the Cardinals who I trust more than Johnny V. I call him that. V for victory. But like anytime I have a Cardinals question of any kind, I know he's connected in there. I know he's knowledgeable. I trust his word. If I have anything, I know I can just like hit him up and be like, hey, what's up with this? And he'll just know the answer.
Yeah, when you told me that he was gonna be on the show, I checked out his podcast. It was like I think I got to see when it was live and everything. I'm like, okay, they definitely know their stuff when it comes to the Cardinals and more and stuff. So it was just great to have him on and just to talk. But I know you got to get ready for to do some producing going on. But before I let you go, bro, is there anything that you got going on that you want to plug? Anything?
I think it sucks that we lost Trevon Diggs, but like the good thing is that we still have a marquee of valuable defensive players on this team, and that even though the one thing we're definitely going to miss from Trevon Diggs is his playmaking ability, we still have the players, the scheme, and the leader, Micah Parsons, on that side to get what we need to be done. It just sucks that Seven won't be out there to experience it.
Yeah, you just want him to be a part of this team, but he's definitely going to be on the sidelines, being there, just being over there, being with the team. I think that'll help as well. But you just going to miss him being on that other side with Gilly. But you got Deron Bland and you got Jordan Lewis and some other great players as well. But I think it's gonna be a great game against the Cardinals. I don't think how a lot of people are going to be a blow. I think it's going to be like what you see when it comes to a rival game. It's gonna be one of those close games, but we're gonna come with the dub. But it's not going to be like how people say it's going to be. But this has been Tacos and Touchdown Live. Y'all have a great Thursday. Can't wait for Sunday football, but you got college football coming up soon. And right now you're gonna have the Giants versus 49ers. Who you got going between those two?
The Niners next.
Yeah, I'm going with the Niners. I didn't expect you to give me like a whole explanation. Like, I was going. Hate to say it, but I'm going with the Niners. But this has been Taco Thursday. Tacos and Touchdown. Have a good one. Peace.